Hello and welcome to episode 7 of season 2 of In 12D, the podcast. I'm delighted to be here again this week. My name is Susie von Menzenkamp and I'm coming live from Ireland. I have a great friend and co-host, Kathy Pratt, who's based in Vermont in the US. And we'd love to extend a really warm welcome to our special guest of this episode. He's a friend. I met him on my own journey, and I'm really, really grateful and inspired that he's here. As you know, this episode title is From the Bench to the Breath, a judge's journey from into healing, I guess. So with huge gratitude, I welcome Roland Steinle, our special guest for today, also known as the accidental meditator. So Roland, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here today.
It's been a really wonderful journey, like how our paths crossed. And that's why I felt really obliged to put journey into healing in there, because I think the first time I met you, we were both on a panel on the stage at the Chopra Center when we were going through that part of the program, and we got to know each other subsequently as we were doing different trainings. So Roland is a retired judge, and he's a Vedic master. He's a holistic life coach, and he has many other trainings under his belt, including Masters of Wisdom, Deeper Still, and Advanced Meditation Practice, as well as some Hatha Gong Yoga, and he also works with intuition. So it has been a wild journey, Roland, that got you from the bench, from your role as a judge in the family law divorce courts. I think you were in at one stage anyway. And how did you find your way to that, through that journey, I suppose, to where you are now?
Well, the inspiration, I guess, was when I went in 2005 or 2006 to my cardiologist, and he told me that the good news was I wasn't going to have a heart attack anytime soon, but the bad news was it's only a question of when I was going to have my first stroke. My heart had thickened, my aorta had thickened, and at age 55, I was at a very high risk of stroke.
Wow.
And after some discussion and what medications I'd be going on, he said, you have to figure out a way to systemically reduce the stress in your life. And I know that's going to be hard. And on the 16 years on the bench, 9 were spent on the criminal bench doing high intensity capital murder cases, because that was what I did as a lawyer for 15 years in the public defender's office, is capital murder cases. So he said I had to figure out a way to do it. And about a year later, 2 of my friends had met Sarah McLean in Sedona, and they were trying to create a business, Retreats by the Sea. And one of the ladies wanted her husband to learn how to meditate because he was super hyperactive, but he wouldn't go up because it wasn't a guy sort of thing to do. So she said, Roland, will you go up to Sedona with them and learn how to meditate? And I said, yeah, I've been thinking about trying to figure out a different approach to life, and I'd be happy to do it. He bailed out. I went up and I learned how to meditate.
Wow.
And for the next couple of years, I was a crisis meditator. In other words, when things were bad, I'd meditate, and when things get good, I'd drop off, which is pretty typical. And at the end of 2008, I was told I had prostate cancer.
Wow.
And so I decided to do radiation treatment, which was 6 weeks of external radiation, followed by implanting radiated seeds. But during the 6 weeks of external radiation, I got really, really serious. I read Dr. David Simon's book, Return to Wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
I meditated twice a day, morning and afternoon, and really, really locked in my practice. And really since the beginning of 2009, that's been my lifeline. And when I did the radiation treatment, I just visualized the radiation as blue healing light. So I breathed in the radiation, the 9 or 10 doses I got in an arc, and I breathed out all the ugly cancerous stuff.
Yeah.
Now it's 14 years and I'm still cancer free, or my body's cancer free. Doctors
Wow.
had this theory that, my body had cancer. The Roland that existed before the diagnosis and the Roland that existed after never changed. The doctors treated my body. The cancer is no longer there. But it was really the cancer diagnosis that converted me from being a crisis meditator to being a dedicated meditator. And a few months later, Sarah said that Deepak and David Simon were coming to Phoenix and I should come. She said, you really need to repeat your training. So there I went. And lo and behold, I met David G, their meditation teacher. And his philosophy was, if you want to learn how to meditate, learn how to teach. So that's what was my decision to do.
Wow. What a journey, like truly a journey into healing by all accounts. And as a meditation teacher myself, I can see the challenges that people have when they come in to learn. And as you said, like a lot of people come as looking for the antidote to stress. And a lot of people have misconceptions because they're like, oh, I can't do it. It's too difficult to quieten the mind. So, like from the mind of somebody who had to have a very sharp mind doing the work that you were doing in your career, how did you find that kind of transition to really moving from like an occasional crisis meditator, like you said, to stabilizing meditation as the foundation of your day, twice a day?
Well, I think people end up into that dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And it always shows up in a little bit different. But between the cardiologist telling me that I was facing, I think having a heart attack would be less of a shock to me than having a stroke. For whatever reason, being told at age 55, I was one step away from having a stroke. Hit me
Yeah.
hard. And then the diagnosis of cancer was the real wake-up call that I had to make a change in my life. And obviously, working with Sarah, going to her retreats. I did
Yeah.
two of Byron Katie's schools for the work. I started seeing there was a different way to approach life.
Yeah.
And when I got the cancer diagnosis and I started meditating twice a day and really starting to see that no matter how busy my day was, getting up early in the morning, driving 25 miles to get my radiation treatment, driving 25 miles back downtown. And at the time I did my radiation treatment, I was involved in a capital murder trial that took 9 months.
Wow.
It was a combination of 28 separate shootings in one trial. And we had 20 jurors, all the witnesses. I couldn't miss a day. For 9 months, so my day was packed, and I just really found out meditating twice a day, really things started, I became less reactive, more reflective. So all of the benefits we learned as teachers later on were on full display. I really bought into the argument that you can change your whole approach. Stress can be handled by meditating twice a day. And then when I started on the teachers courses and started meeting David G, all of the people at the Chopra Center, all of the teachers at the Chopra Center, especially David Simon. David
Yeah.
Simon was a wonderful person. I mean, when I went to that first thing, he was in the back of the room, and I went over and I told him that his book, Return to Wholeness, was really a lifesaver for me. And I said, I had prostate cancer. He says, you sit down next to me. You tell me all about it. And it was on one of his breaks. How
Wow.
wonderful it was to do it. And then I took his Free to Heal, Free to Love after his diagnosis, because I knew that'd be his last course he would teach. And those people, you just
Yeah.
start learning that you can change. If you change your perspective on life, his philosophy was you can wake up in the morning and everything can be happening for you, or you could wake up every morning and everything can be happening against you. and you get to choose your attitude, you might as well pick a good one.
There you go.
So every time I think of him, I keep that, an attitude of gratitude.
Nice, nice.
Beautiful.
David Simon was such an inspirational person. I only met him once when on his last seduction of spirit, and I was just, like, he was a very, very special human being, and I loved his book Wisdom of Healing when we were doing the training. It was really a book that shifted an awful lot in me. Just his writings and stuff. It was a very poignant time at the Chopra Center that year as well, because of what he was going through himself. So, we can't keep everything at bay, but how we enter into that journey, like whether your diagnosis is healed or whether it isn't, you can go through the journey with compassion, with kindness, with that sense of gratitude, I suppose, like you just said.
When I went to Free to Love, Free to Heal, everybody said, why are you going over there? I said, or when I came back, I guess they asked me, what did you learn? I said, I learned how to live for a man who's dying.
Wow. Wow.
Which makes me think of a question. So you were saying that you can't heal if you're filled with fear. And clearly a cancer diagnosis is scary. Just by what you've accomplished in your life tells me that you have a strong mind. What was that like, embarking on, now I'm going to daily meditate, I'm going to take better care of myself, and over here I have this diagnosis. How was that for you, dealing with that fear?
Well, the more I meditated, the less I focused on the fear. Because when you meditate, you slow down. The fear is your mind and the ego ruminating on everything bad happening to you. Poor, pitiful me. The mind wants to, and the ego will tell you how rotten your life is. You meditate and you quiet the mind and you start tapping into your intuition, and you can find the gratitude, one way or the other. The more you have gratitude, the less you have fear. Mm-hmm. Lately, I've been doing a lot of work on intuition, and I wrote one book, and it's surprising enough that one of the big antidotes to fear is laughter. When you're engaging in funny laughter, it's incapable of having fear at the same time. The two of them are so inconsistent. So if you're going through a very fearful time, you might as well find on the streaming service of your choice all of the comedy shows and just spend 2 or 3 hours laughing. And you'll find out at the end of the 2 or 3 hours, all of the rumination, all of the fear that you're experiencing beforehand, that starts to slide away. But, the Dalai Lama has his saying that he wakes up every morning and he's grateful for another 24 hours. And he's not going to waste 1 minute other than to see what he could do for other people. And when you have that attitude of gratitude, the fear starts drifting away. And my holistic life coach talks about, are you going to listen to the voice of love, or you're listening to the voice of fear? And if you take the same set of facts, you can ask the question, what is the voice of love telling you? What's the voice of fear telling you? And out of the same set of facts, you're going to get 2 different answers. And then it's your choice. Which voice do you want to listen to? And that's what, and Byron Katie calls it, she does her, you talk about an experience and you talk about everything you're going through, but at the end, she makes you do the turnarounds. And out of the same set of facts, you can turn the whole situation around, and that can be equally as true. Yeah. And once you realize it's equally as true, then the fear and everything else on the unpleasant situations will dissipate. But we tend to listen to the inner critic, the petty tyrant in us. Eat all of the bad garbage that people throw at us. But if I gave the two of you a compliment, you would immediately give me 3 reasons why that's not true.
Yeah.
I'm not
So,
sure.
well, what I'm
Oh,
saying is there's a tendency for us to deflect the compliment and accept
true.
criticism. But if you can flip that in your life around, and I think sometimes just, that's why I like the afternoon meditation. You go through the whole day, you're all stressed, and if you can just find 15 or 20 minutes to get a good meditation in, I call it my decompression chamber.
Mhm.
Nice.
You've been through, because when you wake up in the modern world, you get up in the morning. If you have kids, you got to get them off to school. They're not cooperating, so you're automatically in stress. Then you get on the highway, you got traffic, you're stressed. You get in the office and phone's ringing. When do you ever have an hour and a half to let your body come back to a normal state? Then you
Yeah.
get home and you got to do dinner. You got to get homework done. You got to get everything done. It's 9 o'clock at night and you've been up for 15 hours and not once has your body ever returned to a normal. So if you don't have that 15 or 20 minutes when you walk into the door,
Yeah.
so that the afternoon meditation is wonderful because it's, as I said, it's your decompression chamber. And it doesn't have to be sitting in a chair. You can go out and do a walking meditation like Thich Nhat Hanh,
True.
or
Mhm.
something else. You can do some kirtan chanting. You can do some, something else. But just quieting the mind for a few minutes gives you that ability that once you then re-engage with the family, you're back in that more reflective mode rather than the reactive mode. So
Did
Brilliant.
having the cancer diagnosis make it easier for you to sort of come back into your body and understand the anxiety state versus the reset, more incoherent state?
yes, it made me trust the process more.
Mm, mm,
I went in with this idea that this was a choice I made. I wasn't going to do surgery. I was going to do radiation, and I was going to trust the doctor. And I
Mhm.
had this idea in mind that this radiation was blue healing light. And geez, I got to go in and get blue healing light 5 days a week for 6 weeks.
genius.
I went, I had the second appointment of the day. I knew the man that had the first appointment, and he had a whole different attitude. And he was always angry. Every time I talked to him, he was moaning and groaning about the injustice and da 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 da. But I went in there, and the nurses, and prostate cancer, you're naked from the waist down. You're in this fiberglass form so you don't move because it was CAT scan assisted. So you had about 5 minutes for them to do the CAT scan in order to get the radiation treatment done correctly. So here you're in front of 3 nurses and you're joking with them, and so, and then they say, all ready to go, and I stole the line from Good Will Hunting, let the healing begin.
Mm,
Nice. You really primed yourself, Roland. I love the presence you brought to all of those parts of that journey. And how you embraced it. Like you really, it feels like you really were able to just embrace it. Like it's like life sent you, despite what got you into meditation initially, this came next. And it was like you already had been primed, by your previous, crisis meditation, like even though it wasn't as consistent perhaps before that. And how it just kind of, I don't know. I love how you kind of were weaving it into your visualizations, the words you were using, your presence, your connection with not just yourself, but with the people that were there to heal, to help you heal and help you support you go through the treatment. And that, whilst that is a very kind of holistic approach, and it's all, it feels like even your drive to and from the treatment must have been, you were overcoming a lot, probably even in those journeys to and from. But when you went back then, you were still working as far as I know, you were mentoring, I think you said the Attorney General, and you were, still on the bench somewhat. And so what was Roland like, who was going back into to work or going into the office or going to the court? What was that like? Were you able to maintain that?
Well, I think in terms of transition came after I did the three teachers things almost back to back to back. I never intended to do the yoga one, and Susie, you said you're not leaving. If I'm going to do yoga, you're coming with me. I don't care if I have to drag you kicking and screaming. This was at the end of June of 2012. So I went and did the yoga teacher training, and I ended up actually teaching yoga for the county fitness center.
Wow.
So they then called me the yoga judge because.
Oh, really? Oh my God, that's hilarious. I love how they gave you all these labels.
But if I look at my life, after I completed all the teacher trainings, I know that this is the way I explained it. Early in my career, I said lawyers should come to court on time, they should be prepared, and they should follow the rules. I didn't think that was being unfair. At the end of everything, I flipped it around. In chapter 2, verse 40 of the Gita, you have a right to your own actions, but not the fruit of your actions. Perform your actions without regard to success or failure. And I really took that to heart. I could show up at the court on time. I could be prepared. I could follow the rules. If people didn't want to show up on time, not my problem, one way or the other. If they didn't want to follow the rules, not my problem. I became less reactive, much more flexible. If someone didn't want to show up for their pretrial hearing and it took them 6 times before they got the 5-minute hearing completed, not my problem. We just rescheduled it. I was there every day. Instead of trying to lecture them, we'll just reschedule. I started my jury trials at 9:30 every morning. And if they showed up at 10 o'clock, we'll just reschedule. Less stress on me.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things that you start learning new tools.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest tool we learn? Yogastha Karu Karmani. Establish yourself in the present moment and then take action.
Love it.
Yeah. And so one day I was in juvenile court, and in order to do a lot of things in juvenile court in terms of parental rights and the rest of it, you have to have a lawyer for the parents. That's 2 lawyers. You have to have the assistant attorney general for the state. You have to have a guardian litem for the children. So sometimes it's 4 or 5 lawyers have to be in one place at one time for you to do anything.
Yeah.
So we were waiting for one lawyer to take care of what was going to turn out to be a 10 or 12-minute hearing. And we waited 45 minutes, and she came roaring into the courtroom, running across to where she was supposed to sit. And I told her, stop. And she looked at me and I said, just stop. Let's take 4 nice deep breaths. And I said, if the universe had intended you to be here any earlier, you would have arrived earlier. So why don't you just take a deep breath and go sit at your seat and we'll proceed on. The other lawyers were like shaking their head. And I was saying, well, there's the yoga judge, one way or the other.
So Roland, this is after your training, is that different than before?
Sure, I probably would have lectured her as why, there's 5 of us here. Why are you wasting all of our time? I would have been in the lecture mode, shaming mode.
Which doesn't do a thing, does it?
No. That's what I kind of started to learn, that there's a difference between being reactive, knee-jerk, and being reflective.
Reactive or effective.
Yeah.
Love it.
And so and even though prior to meditating, I always tried to be very compassionate with people. I know the longer I was on the bench, I wanted to be much, much more compassionate one way or the other. You know, even if I had someone who had been to prison 3 or 4 times, I didn't want to listen to the lawyers. I wanted to engage him in a conversation. You're 55 years old. Why should I not send you to prison for 20
Yeah.
years? Give me a good reason. Why is there something that I'm missing here? Why should I? I wanted to hear from him. And this
Brilliant.
gets into where the intuition comes in, because my intuition is telling me that maybe I don't need to send him away.
Good.
But again, these were tools that I was starting to develop, the intuitive powers. But for a judge to say my intuition tells me that I should do this versus X, Y, and Z is a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah. But I suppose you're using your, like, for me, developing intuition was a byproduct of becoming a dedicated regular meditator. You know, it opens up this kind of channel of information and that you can tap into sort of effortlessly and over time. And it can really inform, you know, through your head, heart, your gut. Okay, this feels like a yum. This feels like, meh, this is a bit of a yuck. You know, kind of in terms of setting boundaries, making choices or decisions for yourself anyway. So I think it maintains our own sort of stability within our own system. So when we're engaging with another, we're in the state of coherence is what it feels like. So we can really listen to the other. We can really see them. You know, we're not kind of in our minds going off making up our mind kind of without listening to the person. Like it's like you said, you created space for you and the other to be there in that present moment together. Like it would, I suppose you don't have to kind of tell them what's giving you that gift, what's giving you that insight. It's because it's natural in everybody if they learn how to, you know, stabilize their nervous system and not be in that reactive response all the time. So I'm guessing that made a massive difference. If all the judges and all the lawyers went through a mindfulness practice or mindfulness at work training, like at one stage, I think you said you were teaching lawyers, weren't you? Later on.
Yeah, so actually, while I was on the bench, after I went through the training, I taught at least 30 judges how to meditate. Whether
Wow.
they stuck with it or not, I don't know. I taught some classes in Ayurveda to the judges. I participated in a number of statewide conferences with lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, towards the end, we had, this is when I was working for the Attorney General's office. I was invited to talk about on a panel. Sarah was part of the group, and as well as one of the Gong people. But we had 150 lawyers sign up for a whole afternoon program on mindfulness and the law.
Wow.
Wow.
Incredible group. So it was becoming a big thing, one way or the other. So, and there's still programs being presented. The problem is there's a little bit of a disconnect. While they have programs for lawyers and for judges,
Mm-hmm.
after I finished that 9-month murder trial, I was out of trial for 3 days, and then the following Monday they said, "Are you going to take another murder trial?" So they weren't even going to give me a gap.
Wow.
And I had it scheduled for one of the co-defendants to start another one who was a participant in 2 or 3 of the murders for the serial person. And I just had to say, no, I'm not ready. I've been in trial for 9 months. So there's very much into this world of what have you done for me today? How many cases have you produced? How many cases have you closed? Yes, we'll put on programs talking about mindfulness. We'll talk about stress reduction. We'll talk, there's even a lot of research among lawyers about secondary PTSD, together. But even though there's all this research, lawyers are leaving the profession left and right because of stress and the public defenders, the prosecutors are just leave there saying they can't continue to handle the volume of cases that they're expected to handle all the time. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah. Yeah, I studied with Sarah the mindfulness at work program, you know, and I have worked in a more corporate sector as well. And my kind of conclusion was that the corporations it's popular, you know, to talk about mindfulness at work and, you know, wellness at work. And, you know, it's like it's a bit like the greenwashing a little bit, you know, they want it to be there, but then a lot of them wanted the people working there to do it in their own time. So you can do it at work, but as soon as you finish your shift, you can, you know, stay on another hour and go and hang out with Susie in the conference room. And they were running for the hills. They weren't going to do that. That just was like another thing that the company wanted for free out of them. And so for me, in my experience, I feel like people have to self-select. You have to find the part of you that really is like, you were guided to find your teachers, you were guided from your inner sanctuary, your inner temple, to find what you needed to heal your body, or as your, you know, to help you with your stress. Whereas I'm sure back before you had those experiences, if they added to your plate, oh, by the way, when you're finished that case, you've got to show up and do X amount of hours in mindfulness, you'd have probably told them where to run. Like, so I think I often really question whether in the workplace is the appropriate venue for teachers to go in and teach, because unless the company is doing it within their own time and they're getting paid while they're doing it, I think, you know, then they do show up.
Ram Dass was asked to write a book after his stroke.
Yeah.
Still here.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And he has a concept of going from the ego perspective to the soul perspective. And that's kind of what's my underlying philosophy in life. And he says the soul perspective is where you replace what have you accomplished for me today with what special moments am I grateful for in this moment.
Mm.
And instead of you're more present, and can I come to a place where I look for nothing, expect nothing, desire nothing, and there's nothing to be consumed, nothing to be attained. That place where time pauses and my thinking slows, and the veil between me and the moment falls, and the past and future melts into now. And so if you're asking me where I want to go in my life, I want to continue to move away from the ego perspective into the soul perspective, because really, isn't that the ultimate goal of a consistent meditation practice? Is
Totally.
to wake up every morning and not worry about what am I going to accomplish today, but what special moments am I going to be able to find today?
Yeah.
I mean, and he said that after the stroke, he spent weeks in the hospital, and he was mad at his guru for allowing him to have a stroke. He said he believed his guru had this magic power to stop him from having a stroke. And then the woman that took care of his ashram called him and said, you know, the Maharishi is just absolutely devastated with news of your stroke. And, you know, if he had any power to have stopped it, he would have. And the light turned on, and he said that he then realized his stroke was the result of the bad karma that he lived in his life up to that point in time, and not anything other than that. And that the purpose of a guru was not to prevent anything bad from happening to you. The purpose of a guru was to teach you how to react when something befalls you.
Yeah, the dispeller of darkness.
Yes. So and then he gets into the whole idea. He said he had bought a brand new, very fancy BMW, and he said how wonderful it is. He said all of his friends want to come over and take him on all of his errands because they all want to drive his fancy BMW. Talk about a shift in mentality. Yeah. But that whole idea of living that life by a soul perspective Now, obviously, everybody's got to pay their rent or their mortgage, and obviously you have to go buy your groceries.
Yeah.
But or you can create that balance of being in the soul perspective versus working in the daily world, I think is where you want to try to find that balance.
Yeah.
So you have all this perspective because you did these jobs and you did them well, and now you've evolved with all this wisdom. You know, what could you, when people get out of law school, I can only imagine the drive and the ambition and that sort of counter. Is it like, what would you say to younger up and coming people um to be able to, you know, have some of this inside of them before they get their cancer diagnosis?
Well, I even as a even as a middle, when I came to Phoenix, I was 36 and I had practiced law for 10 years. And I was in the
Right.
public defender's office and I had the corner office. And so lawyers would come to me and they'd been in practice for 2 or 3 years and they're going to go, I want to go into private practice. I want to do this. So I mentored a lot of young lawyers. And what I would try to do is find out from what are you really looking for in life?
Mm.
Mm.
And that becomes a big thing. And, you know, it's very, very attractive to say you want to work for a big firm. The big firm probably, I don't know what the current salaries are, but would say the young associate in one of the big firms in Phoenix makes $180,000 a year right out of law school. But their commitment is to work 1,800 billable hours a year. Well, that's 35 billable hours a week. Now you're hired with 8 other associates out of that same class. Now, 5 years down the road, all 5 aren't going to be offered partnerships. So are you going to get a partnership if you're only billing the minimum of 18?
Mm.
No, guys that are getting a partnership are now going to be billing 2,200 billable hours, which now means that you're up at 55 billable hours a year, a week.
Week.
And then you got to add on to billable hours. You have to go to the bathroom, you have to eat lunch, which aren't billable. Your commuting time from the suburbs, if you want to live in the suburbs, isn't billable. And so now you're talking about, in order to get those 2,200 hours in, you're working 80 hours a week. What family balance are you going to have? Can you coach Little League if you're working 80 hours a week?
I doubt
If
it.
you're seeing your partners in the office every Saturday and every Sunday, can you really say, no, I'm not going to go into the office? So when you have the conversation with young lawyers, you have to start talking about what do you really want out of life?
Mm.
You really want to be a partner, or do you want to have a family and be a coach?
Yeah. And then you
Yeah.
have to make your decision where you're going to go. There is a psychologist that talks about self-compassion. I think her name's Kristen Neff, Neff.
Yeah.
And I read her book and I was very fascinated, mainly because she obviously has a lot of Buddhist training because she cites a lot of the authors that I like.
Mm-hmm.
But she came up with something that resonated in my life. When I was a public defender, I did a lot of cases. I mean, just a ton of murder trials. But my personal life was always in shambles. Relationships were short, and everybody always say, well, you're a nice guy, but you're a workaholic.
Yeah.
And what Kristen Neff's take on it is you spend all this time, and then when you're ready to go back and spend some time with your family, the family basically says to you, well, where were you when we needed you?
Yeah.
You
Mm.
weren't around. And so it's a double-edged sword. Not only were you not around, now that once you weren't around, the family now says to you, well, we really don't need you around.
Yeah. They
So
figured it out.
yeah, so it's a very, very interesting thing. And this, now we come back into when I finally learned the ultimate benefit of meditation is if you can create space in the morning to do your meditation and space in the afternoon, you're starting to create balance in your day. And if you can create balance in your day, then you can create balance in your week. And if you can create balance in your week, you can create balance in your life.
Yeah.
You make it sound simple.
Well, I'm not saying it's simple, but you have to figure out the routine. Would you get up every morning and not brush your teeth?
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, people used to get up every morning and read the newspaper and probably spend a half hour reading the newspaper before they went off to work. Or they would, sit and have coffee with people before they started their workday. If you start looking at what your routine is, now you can start looking for that space. Or if you come home and before you have dinner, you sit down and you have 2 cocktails.
Yep.
What's better for you, 20 minutes of meditation or 2 cocktails? Well, if you want the 2 cocktails, I have a little thing on my desk here. It says, I tried meditation, and then there's a little cat holding a glass of wine. You get to make the choice. I've just made that meditation is the thing, and I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy creating that space, and for me, it's worked. I'm not going to walk up and down the streets on Camelback and tell everybody you have to meditate, because that's not true.
Yeah, true.
Has it made a benefit in my life? I can talk for hours on what benefits it's done for me and all the wonderful people I've met and all of the fun things I've done. But
yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. Meditation definitely can take you places, and you can meet absolutely phenomenal people, because what I found on my journey, and that's obviously how we met along the way, was that when you met people, especially like you said, if you really want to learn how to deepen your practice, say you are an occasional meditator, when you make the commitment to learn to teach, and you really dive into, some of the books that you mentioned, like the Bhagavad Gita, and, even the work by Ram Dass and so on, you started kind of, I don't know, it's like you're unraveling some other whole part of yourself. But then you're in scenarios like in retreats or trainings or something like that with like-minded people, and so it's kind of like, wow, there's that sort of need for all of the kind of ego posturing, or the kind of comparing and competition and things like that just fall away by the wayside, or the need to go and have drinks in order to feel relaxed in yourself, to be able to be at ease and talk about stuff. All that falls away because we all hang out and meditate for a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour in the evening. Like, I think when I went to Chopra, I didn't really know what I was looking for. It was really an intention I had set, which I didn't really know what the outcome of it was going to be. And when I got there, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was kind of half afraid it could be a cult, right? Well, we're Irish, so we're very skeptical over here. And then the other half of me was like, well, look, I had nothing to lose. It was only a week. But what blew my mind was like that there was nothing really outlandish in terms of what our schedule was. It was morning meditation, bit of yoga, eating a nice vegetarian, kind of eating the rainbow, fresh, local kind of produce. And, listening to some of the teachings, I think really was inspiring. Listening to Deepak, learning about all the other teachers that kind of came along as well. And I remember at the end of it thinking, wow, the ingredients are very simple. Like, there's no big kind of mystery here. The mystery's in here for sure. But I was like, wow, we can put those components together and have this truly transformational sort of experience. And it kind of, it's like it keeps unpacking and leading, like padam, breadcrumb after breadcrumb, the next book, the next training, the next teacher, the next journey, or whatever it is. And it's been really phenomenal to be on that journey. And like you said, you're not going out kind of waving down everybody and saying, hey, you've all got to do this. Because like we talked about earlier, there are more ways than one to arrive at the same destination. And I know Roland, you went on to study, what is it, Gong yoga? Is it
Correct.
Hatha Gong, is it? And Kirtan and things like that. So for the person who's maybe listening to this, and if you are listening, please like and subscribe our channel. We are passionate about it. But if you are listening, there's other ways, like Roland is going to share now, about how you can, reach that part of yourself, like that quiet gap between your thoughts.
Well, a lot of people do yoga these days, and the sad part of my personal perception,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's the truth, it's my personal perception. United States takes something and then creates a sport out of it. Yoga wasn't intended to be a sport. It was intended to be a break between meditation. And the idea is to find a pose and find a moment of stillness in the pose, and then gracefully move to the next pose and find a moment of stillness, and then move to the next pose. And Patanjali, who put together the 8 limbs of yoga, has only one thing in the sutras about the asanas. And he says the asanas should be stable and comfortable. Now, I challenge you to go to a yoga studio and watch the people in the front row of the yoga studio who are all trying to do the most advanced expression of the pose and are doing nothing more than wobbling back and forth, or some of the different kinds of yoga that are more forms of like advanced
theatrics.
And the guy that taught me Hatha Gong yoga, he always, when we got to tree pose, always reminded us of the adage, the tree at the side of the hill will grow every bit as strong as the tree on the top of the hill. If you need a little support in tree pose, feel free to go to the side of the room and stand next to the wall and find an expression of the pose that you can find that moment of stillness.
Nice.
And he began every class by, again, in the Gita, not once, but twice, Krishna reminds Arjuna that it's better to do your dharma, your prescribed duties, imperfectly rather than do another person's duties perfectly. So when I would teach my yoga class, I remind people, if tree pose means putting your heel just above your ankle bone and you can find that moment of stillness, do that rather than try to get it way up on the thigh. If you can't, and I always taught beginners yoga. And if we had new people in the class, we'd always start from the beginning. But my concept was find the pose, you can find the stillness, then gracefully move to the next pose. So again, if you're doing yoga, you are doing a meditative practice if you're finding that moment of stillness in between graceful movement. Kirtan chanting is meditative. You put yourself in a room with 100 people chanting the Shanti mantra, I can guarantee you're going to find those moments of silence. If you're doing Gong yoga, you're getting into a nice stable pose, and then there's a strike pattern that will, if it's a warrior pose, it's a strength pose, and then the deep tones of the gong are going to vibrate right through you. So all of these things are meditative. So you have to find something. The key to any kind of meditative practice is not duration, it's consistency.
Absolutely.
If you're meditating twice a day for 15 minutes every day, rather than trying to force 30 minutes a day, twice a day, you're doing a better job. And the same thing with I've gone to Buddhist monasteries, I've gone to other things where you got to sit on a cushion and the guy's walking behind you and telling you to straighten your back. Well, Deepak never sat on a cushion at the Chopra Center. I volunteered at a lot of the Chopra events, and I've never saw the man sit on a meditation.
Me neither. Yeah.
the documentary for the Dalai Lama, he has a special chair made for him for meditation.
Yeah.
And David G says, comfort is queen. Why?
Absolutely.
Because if you're in a chair that you're comfortable with, you will come back and do it the next day. So consistency and comfort are the keys to a great meditation practice, because if you're comfortable, you will be coming back on a regular basis. So for me, those are my keys.
Yeah, in Ireland, I remember inventing beditation when I was doing the training, because in the winter in the old house that we lived in, it was bloody freezing. And, it was easy to get out and sit on my mat or sit on a cushion in the warmer months. But in the winter, I was like, I don't want to even get out of bed. So I just started doing meditation. I'd sit up in bed, just set the timer, like you said, really commit to the time and do the same time consistently. And it was joyful. It was blissful, like going out of the sleep stage into that. Like it was never hard, because I made it easy to succeed. I think, the conception of like sitting cross-legged, on a cushion, or sitting in a cave, or, whatever. I think, that's not even an aspiration for a regular meditator. You can do it anywhere. You could be sitting in your car. It mightn't suit everyone to do it as soon as they wake up. Where's the weirdest place you ever meditated?
Well, you talk about the car. The afternoon meditation sometimes became problematic if you had an after work event.
Yeah.
There have been times where I'd go to the afternoon event and I'd be in the parking lot and I'd do a guided meditation for 15 minutes in the car before I went into the event.
Brilliant.
Because I knew that if I went into the event and I got home at 8 o'clock, then I wouldn't meditate. So I might as well get the 15 minutes in. And on Insight Timer, I got about 24 meditations of various lengths. And so I'll do the guided meditation one way or the other.
Yeah.
The other comment I want to make is that when I made the decision to leave in 2016, the bench, I could have stayed for another 3.5 years or 4 years. But the more I became into meditation, the less I became attached to the identity that I was a judge.
Okay.
A matter of fact, I don't have it on today. I had to take it off for a day surgery, but I have a little bracelet that has small j, small r. Instead of Judge Roland, I was just Roland.
Nice.
But I became less and less attached. Somewhere along the line, and I don't know, with David Simon, David G, we talked about that we're all Shakespearean actors in a play. Some days we play the hero, some days we play the foil, some days the comic fool, but we all play a role every day. But at the end of the day, we're just us.
Yeah.
And that afternoon meditation gets us back to being just me. And so when I was a judge, before I walked out the door, the back door to my chambers, I took off my robe and I hung it up and I had said, "You're no longer Judge Roland, you're just Roland. Hang your robe up and go about your day." So the more I meditated, the less attached to being a role. I went from role to soul.
Nice.
From ego to soul. And so when I decided, I've been on the bench for 16 years. I did my bit in family court for 3 years early on. I just, in my highest good and my best interest, going back to family court was not there. I only came to that conclusion because of my non-attachment to the role. So I decided I would leave, and a week later, someone called me up and said, "You want to go work for the Attorney General?" And I said, I talked to him. He asked me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a mentor. I don't want to be a lawyer. I just want to be a mentor to young lawyers." So I did that for 2.5 years. So the big question that I always ask myself, what is in my highest good and my best interest? And I just leave it out there, and then I get into do meditation, and eventually the universe will provide me with an answer if I can keep my vibration high enough.
That's a lovely segue if we can grab it in our last kind of 5 minutes together. I think there's definitely another couple of hours that we could talk away here, Roland. But, so you went into really developing your intuition. I'm guessing that you were having experiences of maybe higher states of consciousness, and maybe it was like I'm assuming this, that it was in a state of refinement is how you came upon your next teacher. And and you also did the holistic healing coaching with Alan Cohen. So did those things kind of happen around the same time, your decision to go into the coaching, or did the coaching happen and then the intuition happened, or were they simultaneous?
Well, I've been following Marie Manicheri, energy intuitive out of Seattle, and after COVID, she was going to do a retreat on an island in Greece.
Oh, lovely.
Manifest your destiny.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm retired. What am I going to do? So I decided I'd sign up for it, and I went over there. And so I said, and I had done some one-on-ones with her. She'll put you on the table and read both your chakras and your aura. And so I raised my hand. I said, I'm retired. What destiny I have? And she said, oh, you're going to become a life coach. And I'm a little bit of a resistor. And so I kind of resisted. And then I left there, and then I went to Danielle's retreat. Danielle taught me yoga at Chopra. You remember Danielle?
I do, yeah.
And we do yoga, but then she put us in breakout groups and with younger people, and all these, we'd give us a problem, and after about second or third day, these young women were saying, boy, you got great insight. Boy, you got great insight. Boy, you got great insight. So I went into Asilomar, and I went into the main lodge where the internet was, and I went right to Alan Cohen's site, which Marie told me I should do, and I signed up. I figured that the universe was giving me the answer that I kept
pointing the direction, yeah.
So I went ahead and did it and completed it, and then in the last year, Alan Cohen told me I should do more writing, and so I took a spiritual writing class, and then Marie didn't go do a retreat last year, but part of the writing course was a week on Hawaii doing an intensive week course, and who was on the island but Marie?
Oh, so, wow.
So David G challenged us to pick a theme for every month. So that's where I got into Facebook. Every month I came up with a theme. And then this year I came up with my theme for 2025 was Life is a Dance from Wayne Dyer.
Nice.
Rather than Life is a Journey. And the purpose of dance is not to get to the other side of the floor. The purpose of dance is just to go out and enjoy yourself, sort of like the soul perspective. So every month I come up with a theme, and then during the month I write different aspects. This month is the second agreement from Don Miguel Ruiz, don't take anything personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been writing on that on Facebook. And Alan Cohen wants me to write a book, and so I'm trying to figure out, there's a book out there, The Monk Sold His Ferrari, about a lawyer that sold his
Ferrari. That's right, yeah. Robin Sharma, isn't it?
Yeah, so maybe you'll see down the road, the judge became a something or another, an accidental meditator. So
nice. Well, I had a look at I was browsing through your website, and I know we've been sharing your website below. So I encourage everybody who's listening to take a look, and all of your writing is there under your blog. So I think you've been writing away. You probably got half the book written already on that blog spot.
Yeah, well, I'm going to, my stuff I wrote from October through the end of March will be added this month. Every 6 months, they take everything I put on Facebook and send it to my web designer, who just happens to be a very well-known artist up in Sedona.
Oh, really? Wow.
So and my Jodist astrologer is up in Sedona too. So everything good comes out of Sedona.
Who knows, Roland, maybe we'll bump into each other, because I know I met you a couple of times in Arizona when we went to see, we went for Darshan together, and I know we've hung out a few times, but Sarah's got the teachers retreat coming up in Sedona next February, I think. So I'm going to be scheduled there. So who knows? I'll be definitely flying into Phoenix anyway to get there. So I'll definitely hook up with you for sure.
Okay, I'll take you to all the good restaurants up there.
Oh,
Nice.
rightio. Now, sold. We're just gone over our time. Kathy, did you want to ask any other thing before we wrap it up fully?
What a pleasure. What an inspiration. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your ideas and your life with us.
If anybody wants any recommendation on books or things that I found inspirational, you have my email address. Just send me an email and I'll be happy. I have a Zoom account, a business Zoom account. I'll be happy to set up a Zoom call and we can chat. And I'm very, very open to share whatever I have to people, and been more than welcome to do that for anybody. So just reach out through my Roland's rsteinle@me.com account, and I'll be happy to help you.
Oh, that's so brilliant. I love that there's so much more that people can do from this conversation. Like there's the next part. And Roland really is an inspiration. I'm so grateful from the bottom of my heart. I just love how our journeys brought us. Like if we'd have said this in yoga class, like that we'd be hanging out here doing podcasts, 13 years later, we'd have probably ran for the hills or something. But I'm so grateful that you're here. I really, I loved hearing your story again and the work you're doing, and you really are an inspiration to everybody in your field as well. Like, so thank you so much for your presence and your generosity of spirit today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Anytime I can help, just let me know.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners and people watching, thank you again for joining us. And we have another amazing guest set up for next week. So keep liking, keep subscribing, and keep coming back every week at In 12D, the podcast.
See ya.